Yeah, and so we talk about personal data stores, like decentralizing at some point a copy of the data for people to be able to own it and use it as a capital for others to build on top of it, not the data just to be stored in main platforms. But then we will continue to talk about like some decentralization and APIs with a talk from Ben Carvill about the importance of APIs within the Web3 ecosystem. So Ben Carvill is business developer at API3, and he will tell us about the Web3 and APIs. Hello, Ben. How are you?
Hello, Mehdi. I'm very well, thank you. How are you? Thank you for having us back again on the API Day stage.
Yeah, and it's the Open API technology track. We talk about future standard, de facto standards, or bottom-up standards that will happen. So yeah, definitely you are in the right place here. I invite
Absolutely.
you to sure. Your slide are shared. The stage is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mehdi. So yeah, just for some context, so my name is Ben Carvill. I'm from API3. We are a digital asset nascent business or organization living purely on chain. So just for some perception, so just for some understanding of my perception of kind of where I'm viewing things from, a quick introduction to API3 and what we're doing. In a nutshell, we are making Web2 APIs compatible with Web 3.0 applications. And more specifically, we're providing the ability to call Web2 APIs and add additional functionality within smart contract-based applications. Just to add some further context to this, we have a very lightweight piece of plug and play technology called Air Nodes that is deployed on AWS. So we're basically kind of democratizing the ability for Web2 APIs to access the Web3 economy. And at the moment, we have around 190 APIs that we're kind of deployed and integrated into various different blockchains. So just to start off with, there's a lot of talk and hype around what Web 3.0 is. I think every day you're seeing more and more kind of thought leaders on LinkedIn or wherever it might be sort of put their thoughts around what it is, and it seems to be an increasingly trendy topic. In a nutshell, the previous constructs of Web 2.0 is that there are centralized entities that are using your data and are effectively turning you into the product. The data is a valuable resource, which is which reflects in the things like the share price of Google, or how Facebook can monetize their advertising platforms. So, and that also boils down to things like financial services or everyday products that people interact with. Web 3.0 is it's built on the premise of a distributed network, DLT technology, and it's more focused around participation than acquiring users. So there's a general premise, and just some kind of boiling that down a little bit further. People talk about Web 3.0 community. It's very important that you view the participation of people within the networks in Web 3.0 as a fundamental shift from people interacting with Web 2.0 services. There are ever increasing amount of new businesses, new industries emerging, NFTs being the latest sort of use case that seems to emerge, but that translates into music, it translates into gaming, it translates into art. I think something that is something that underpins Web 3.0 is composability, and really I think it stems from the open source community, but the ability to build products and services from existing code or existing products, and it only really adds to the innovation that happens within the space. Another fundamental principle of Web 3.0 is transparency and audibility. So the premise of DLT technology or blockchain is that you have an immutable ledger of transactions. It is a principle that changes the mentality of people operating in that economy, and it's very important to kind of bear that in mind. And the premise of a coded application or coded piece of law as such means that you can ingrain additional functionality within applications in Web 3.0. So yeah, just a quick overview of that. again, wanted to kind of introduce the concept of a smart contract. The kind of general terminology that uses that is replacing an app in Web 3.0 is a decentralized application, or a DApp, and that really is just the user interface for people looking to utilize smart contracts and present that in a way that is digestible for most people. This is going to lead into the talk later, but smart contracts are programmable pieces of rules. They're autonomous. They rely on inputs from external data to trigger out X outputs, and they are built on top of a protocol layer, which basically adds consensus and security to the viability of that smart contract. You can see on the right-hand side there just a bit of an introduction of, I guess, the infrastructure of Web3. That is from the Web3 Foundation's description, which is, you can see there that there are 3 layers. The first, which is typically the protocol layer, which is being built on. Layer 0 is seen as the interoperability layer to have the ability to have multiple smart contracts from multiple layer 1s speak to each other. And layer 2 seem to be the additional utility that is being derived on top of layer 1s. And again, this is we will loop back around to this in a moment or later on in the kind of conversation, but a quick primer on DeFi. So decentralized finance emerged circa probably 18 months ago. And since it's first emerged in January 2019, you can see there, it's grown significantly in regards to TVL, which is total value locked. It basically is looking at the traditional banking system and breaking down some of the barriers around remittances, or more specifically the charges around remittances. The kind of state of financial exclusion, particularly when you think about it on a global level, is quite large. There are many people in various different nations that do not have access to traditional banking services or banking products, and Web 3.0 is a very easy way to access this, and DeFi is the on-ramp to that in some ways. And basically the centralized nature of the current system and the financial infrastructure of when you have a loan, for example, or when you may access a credit card, for example, these are 3 things that really this challenges and takes it on, really. So the question here is the importance of Web 2.0 APIs in Web 3.0 is crucial. You have autonomous programmable code, and the question is whether you can underpin new industries within Web 3.0 by accessing Web 2.0 APIs. So the first point I wanted to start on was why and how APIs drive utility within smart contracts. So the problem with calling Web 2 APIs directly from the blockchain is that you need to basically have a secure gateway to add that consensus layer to stop potential corruption or stop a single point of failure, basically being a correctable point in what is a decentralized autonomous ecosystem. The utility and the value from interacting with the real world is vast, and to really see the adoption of Web 3.0 in, not in a bad way, but in a meaningful matter, more so than maybe we have done so far in the industry over the past 2, 3, 4, 5 years, is really bridging the gap between the real world application, the real world needs of people, and what is the potential of this technology based upon the fact of accessibility, transparency, and removing sort of the middlemen and the centralized constructs that exist. So this is known as the Oracle problem. It is the kind of gateway, the gateway between the real world and the Web 3.0 world, and that of course is delivered by APIs. However, to kind of caveat how APIs will drive utility within the smart contracts, that you cannot directly call in its current state a Web 2.0 API. So the the premise is that oracles are the gateway for data to be called by smart contracts, and you need this layer because when you call an API data point or endpoint, you have to validate that through every single node in the system or the network, whichever protocol it might be. And to do that would require it's quite takes a number of blocks to process around the protocol. B, you have variable data coming from those API endpoints. So for example, if you think about a price feed or price data feed, that price feed is always changing. To have a direct integration from blockchain to Web 2.0, you would need to have consistent updating across the nodes, which just isn't viable with the way that the current blockchains work. And I imagine the blockchains in the future will work as well. The other kind of caveat to this is that if you have an autonomous programmable piece of code, which is a smart contract, and you have a data input from Web 2.0 that is potentially a single point of failure in that contract being valid, or whatever that contract is outputting, there is an argument that relying on a single point of failure or single source of truth is still a centralized construct, and you're kind of removing all of the decentralized factors or the attributes of what is a protocol layer, and therefore invalidates really the whole purpose of using a smart contract. So that is what is known as the Oracle solution, or and in some ways the Oracle problem as well. However, so when you do look into what is the Oracle problem, and once you kind of get around how you would source data from Web 2.0, it's very interesting to think about what new use cases can be derived from having accessibility to that data. And the most obvious point to talk around here is the ability to access financial data, whether it's commodities or forex, or whether whichever kind of price data feed you might be looking for. That's really seen in some ways a new industry emerge, and it's I referenced it earlier, the decentralized finance industry. Without the application of bringing across Web 2.0 real world data into Web 3.0, this industry simply would not have been possible. And you can see the significant growth that it's had, and is probably going to continue to have if trends continue to kind of look the way that it's going. What's more is the ability to overlay that decentralized finance data with potentially a self-sovereign ID, for example. How would you start to form a self-sovereign ID in an autonomous landscape when you have no ability to input data? So you can start to look at perhaps utilities data or history of utilities information, for example, and you can start to overlay that with maybe business data that is kept on in centralized Web 2 platforms. You can extract that via APIs, and then you suddenly have an overlay of an ID. When you think about sports data, again, if you bring that sports data on chain, you can start to look at and building prediction markets. There's obviously other use cases within potentially disrupting the gambling industry. And again, I mean, simply bringing in the weather data. The calling of APIs could be directly fed into a parametric insurance contract. If that would be a historic transparent proof of weather on chain, and that could trigger a payout if somebody was perhaps looking to protect their crops from climate change damage. Open banking data is a huge topic, and I think is very much has a great deal of crossover with Web 3.0. When you start to think about how you might call account details, previous payment details, and somebody's looking to form a on-chain lending on-chain loan, or on the flip side, somebody wants to provide the ability for them to lend from a collateralized pool. That in itself is quite powerful. It sort of democratizes how people can then spend their loan. There could be direct interactions between the current infrastructure that is the banking system and the decentralized lending protocols or processes, and you're starting to see an overlap of the real world and what is this sort of bizarre, sometimes bizarre Web 3.0 world. The last 2 points here are not, well, they're hypothetical scenarios. So something that is incredibly topical, of course, is the kind of climate change issues that we're all facing. So there was a project looking at open data standards around the climate and carbon emissions, sorry. And you can see there, I think they have 9,000, they analyzed 9,000 different data points across what is a fairly complex energy grid, you know, ranging from local councils through to, you know, large industry through to maybe just, you know, automobiles and vehicles are moving around. So when you start to think about how APIs can bring that data into perhaps an on-chain automated, you know, carbon offsetting environment, and you have the ability to kind of call every single API point, bring that into Web 3.0, and then automatically start to offset that. And, you know, if people wanted to participate or contribute into that, you know, what is the fight of climate change, they have the ability to do so. So something we're looking at the moment is, you know, whether autonomous vehicles, which have a significant amount of computation power, they have a huge amount of data being produced, whether it's location, driving style, status of vehicle, that in itself is going to become a large sort of, you know, when you go back to the premise of Web 3.0, it's going to become a large data point that either consumers will own or it will be the manufacturers of the vehicles will own. And as you start to think about where consumer preferences or ethics might go, you know, is this going to be the opening up of perhaps an open automotive data market where you choose who your data is shared with, and you choose where your which companies or services you want to interact with, and you can decide who wants to target you or who wants to market to you. So there's some new use cases that are being opened up at the moment, and the hardware is very much already there for the autonomous vehicle infrastructure. It's just a case of kind of finding the application on the other side. So yeah, so where is this all going? So just a you know, holistic view of the current state of the open API economy. I think there's going to be a huge shift towards open APIs and service providers, particularly those who currently have a closed ethos. The core demands of consumers owning their data is going to be continually growing in importance. I think those that do not give the option for consumers to own their data is going to be viewed as perhaps bad actors. You're seeing maybe some negative rhetoric around Meta or Facebook's move into Meta, for example, which is just a very clear and obvious example of this. Yeah, and the premise of participation over participation and engagement of community over kind of acquiring and having users or customers. For example, you can compare the current kind of lending infrastructure, financial services lending infrastructure, to that of somebody being able to provide collateral for somebody else to borrow on the other side. And so that is, you know, it's a shift in mindset, it's a shift in service delivery, but ultimately it provides better products for the end user, end consumer. I think there's going to be, I think we're starting to see huge disruption of certain industries, as well as new industries emerging. I think the metaverse is already being kind of divided up into many different spheres, whether it's gaming, NFTs and art, or you know, people buying physical land, digital land even, through to as well as the abilities for APIs from the real world to start to play into how identity platforms work, how finance operates, insurance contracts are delivered, arguably marketing and ownership of data. That obviously goes hand in hand. Governance of everyday activities and supply chain and gaming. I already mentioned gaming. I think we will see mass composability, and I think that there's going to be a lot of services composability will be delivered via APIs. We're already looking at how layer 2 roll-up solutions, which kind of drive efficiencies on protocols, have APIs that can speak to each module within each other's products. And the ethos of those different solutions that are being built is that they don't know which component of their product is ultimately going to be the best performing, but they do have the mindset that they are happy to own whichever module performs the best, and they're also happy to work in the future with other competitors as such that that may have better modules in different parts of the rollup, so they can all kind of form the ultimate rollup maybe in 2, 3, 5 years. I think that's a key factor, and it's something that the open source community has been delivering for years now, and it's only led to better products with better outcomes for the everyday consumer. And yeah, I think just the shift away from the centralized constructs means that at the end of the day, there's going to be services being able to be delivered that weren't viable in the last decade or so, and it will bring down the economic barriers that exists and open up more inclusive service provision for people across the world. And then that's the end of the slide.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ben. Thank you for the presentation. We just have 2 minutes for the presentation. Do you think we can really? It's an ecosystem that has some rules that can be really orchestrated by let's say by tokens. Do you really think this kind of transaction is good to be managed by tokens, orchestrated by tokens?
The Web 3.0 ecosystem being tokenized as such.
Yeah, I think this is the quote from Andrew Chen. The future, what he called the Web 3, is that a platform owned by users and transaction orchestrated by tokens.
Yeah, so the token is the ownership of the network, right? So the token represents somebody having the ability to participate in what is, if you look at the kind of carbon emissions, there's some kind of early applications emerging around carbon credits, which it's very early. It's very, I don't want to use this as a good case study, but the ability to own part of a carbon credit, which is the offset of what you're kind of emitting, which it isn't at the moment. But if you can in effect own a certain percentage of, and you're starting to monetize what is carbon emissions, then you can start to you add financial value to somebody performing an action which has a positive outcome, net outcome for the climate. So do I believe that it's the right use case for everybody? The tokenization of governance is very interesting. There are some tokens that do not need to exist, and is just a means of value exchange. I think that's a fair overview of kind of the current state of tokenization. It's a huge topic in itself.
Yeah, no, it's not an easy question, but yeah, just asking because all these apps and APIs and stuff like that. Let's say a lot of tokens have been more utility tokens more than being really used, and I really see your vision. It's just asking about how do you think, what would be the real incentive, except the value of the token on speculation, but how the value will take. How the token will take value over time, to be really an asset that orchestrates the network.
Yeah, I mean, it's right. What you kind of used there was, the utility of the token. The incentivization of the economic models of Web 3.0 is completely different to Web 2.0. It's very difficult for people to compare, a token to maybe a share or an asset, a section of a company per se, which. It's a different kind of playing field. The token represents really your ability to own part of whatever the community is participating in. I see the kind of Web3 space as community as almost tribes in effect, and they're kind of gathering around causes or gathering around services that matter to them. So you think about maybe public service delivery and whether you could have a token which helps you govern how your local services are delivered. That's got a very different incentivization structure to that token. Maybe it doesn't need to float on the market, but maybe it's just a governance mechanism. Through to something such as, I don't know, let's go for maybe a Dogecoin, for example, where the community is sort of dead set on the kind of irony of a dog token becoming a means of actual exchange in a future economy, or maybe on a different planet, for example. So the token is the ability to have a token and almost feel, attached to a cause or to a purpose or to a network, really is, what participation means. And the token is the incentivization for people to participate, which, attention is difficult to capture in Web 2.0, and people are fighting over attention, and people spend billions of pounds trying to get other people's attention. Whether you can change that economic model and people own their data, people own part of the community or participate in the community via a token. That's how I see, the value of what that means for people. You are right. It's quite a big topic. We could probably have another 20 minutes going through that. But
yeah, 20 hours for sure.
Yeah.
I was just asking your point of view.
Yeah. But yeah, that's I think that's a fair sort of breakdown of how it looks. I mean, there is a the ethos of a DAO, which is a decentralized autonomous organization. So the governance mechanisms of a DAO is via tokens. So you can participate in the voting and direction of where you want that entity to go, and you can kind of, anybody can come in and enter a DAO at any point and play that role. So that's also quite an interesting shift in kind of removing the barriers to access that some places might, some people across the world might have.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ben. Thank you for this.
You're welcome.
Love to have you again to continue the discussion.